Hey everybody, Austin here again with another Let's Play video. And today it's going to be Mega Man for the Sega Game Gear. This is a game that, for one, I've wanted to finish for a long time, but also I've wanted to cover it on my channel for a long time. I actually dabbled with it just a little bit via software emulation back in the late 90s and early 2000s, but I never really made it anywhere in the game. It was more just to dabble with it and see how it compared to classic Mega Man, and it always impressed me because it always seemed to play well, and it seemed to look really good too, particularly by Game Gear and Master System standards. Don't take that the wrong way, Master System and Game Gear fans. But I've never actually finished it up until this past week, and I actually really enjoyed my time with it. I've since finished it multiple times, and I've since failed to record this Let's Play successfully about 15 times, so you can probably add about another 4 or 5 full playthroughs into that. But yeah, we're gonna go through Game Gear Mega Man, which is a hodgepodge of Mega Man's 4 and 5 on the NES. It also has a little bit of Mega Man 2 sprinkled on top, for good measure, I suppose. I'll sort of get into that later as we go through this game, but it's still a really fun game. It plays really well. It looks really good. Actually, it's probably one of the best playing action platformers on the Game Gear or Sega Master System. Just between those two platforms, it is just spot on. Very precise, very fun, very fluid. And as a classic Mega Man fan, I've really enjoyed it. And if you're a classic Mega Man fan, I do recommend trying it and giving it a shot. Now, you will be disappointed as a classic Mega fan because, you know, it does sort of fall flat on its face about halfway through the game. And halfway through the game is actually not very long into the game because it's probably only about half the length of a traditional Mega Man game, from Mega Man 2 through 6 or something like that. It is quite short, actually. But actually, what I do like about it being short is that I can beat it in less than a half an hour. I don't have to spend an hour to an hour and a half like I might have to with some other Mega Man games. So, you know, you could look at that as a benefit, actually. So. But yeah, what we're going to do here is go through the whole game. Should take us about 30 minutes, and should be a fun time. Before we actually jump into things, though, as always, I'd like to give a big shout out to my current Patreon backers. So those kind folks are going to flash by the screen. Thank you guys for your continued patronage. Likewise with the recent live stream, super chatters, and channel members. I do live streams here every Thursday night, so if you're around, feel free to stop in on those streams and say hello. So let's go ahead and hit the start button here. If it lets us, there we go. And you'll notice that this game has 2 difficulty modes. I do recommend playing this on the normal difficulty. Hard mode actually makes bosses and enemies more defensive, and it also makes them more offensive at the same time. It basically boosts their defense and boosts their offense as well. So they do more damage and they receive less damage from you as well. Also, more enemies appear and new enemies appear as well that aren't in the normal difficulty. So if you want to see the full game, hard mode is kind of what you want to do eventually, but I don't recommend starting on hard mode. Some bosses in this game jump around the screen like they're on crack or something, and they're very, very difficult to deal with, especially Napalm Man with his attacks that just have huge blast radius, and it's very, very difficult to avoid. And if you play on hard mode, he'll probably kill you in 3 or 4 hits, which makes for a not very fun boss fight. So and speaking of which, in terms of the order I'm going to play in, it doesn't really matter as long as I've done Bright Man first. So we're going to actually go ahead and do Bright Man first. And what I meant by Bright Man first, I actually meant Bright Man before Napalm Man. I need to go into Napalm Man's stage with Bright Man's weapon. Otherwise, I'll probably get wrecked, completely annihilated by Napalm Man. So. But for those of you guys that are familiar with the classic Mega Man series on NES, you'll notice that this game actually holds up visually extremely well to them. It is just very nice to look at. They've actually replicated the graphics pretty much flawlessly, just about, and even added a few extra speckles of detail here and there. So you'll notice on these little grasshoppers, they have better shading to them, and on Mega Man himself, you'll notice that he's actually got extra details on his armor, which makes his armor look a little more shiny than it would normally, which is actually kind of nice. It's kind of welcome, in my opinion. It's a nice modification. It doesn't really hurt it, but it just adds to it. And I think that's the best kind of touching up that you can do with an old game like Mega Man's 4 and 5. But like Mega Man 4, we're going to actually come down to this ladder, and we're going to hop across these platforms. The level design is pretty much spot on with the originals, and because the game is so responsive, you know, as long as you're, you know, half decent at these Mega Man games, it is actually, you know, not very hard to get through these levels if you're already familiar with them. Now this level can be extra tricky because you'll notice that there's a lot of screen crunch in this game, and that's a common complaint I see with this version of Mega Man. And honestly, it's a perfectly valid complaint. I don't see any reason, you know, to demonize that complaint. It's a totally valid complaint. But what some people don't know is that by holding on the jump button here, you can actually stop and change where the camera is. So you can scroll it up, you can scroll it down. And so we're going to push it all the way over this way. And actually, we're going to push it down a little bit because we're not going to be able to see these spikes if I have it pushed down or pushed up too far. And so there we go. We can actually see quite far ahead of us now, whereas we would have seen a little bit less into the distance. The camera functionality is actually very important in this version of Mega Man. And you definitely want to get used to using that on a first playthrough. On subsequent playthroughs, it doesn't really bother me. I don't really use it at all because I know where all the gaps are, and I know where all the spikes are. I know what all the leaps of faith are, and that is something that anyone that plays this game for more than a couple of minutes will pick up on, or a couple of playthroughs, I should say, not a couple of minutes, but anyone that plays this game for more than a couple of playthroughs will pick up on where the dangerous jumps are, where the leaps of faith are, where the spikes are, things like that, just like in any other game that requires precision and some memorization. But yeah, on a first playthrough, I highly recommend getting used to using the camera mechanic. And I'm probably going to get hit by that. That was bad. That's actually the first time that's ever happened on that section. Slamming into one of those light bulb projectiles. Unfortunately, that whole area is just one large, endless pit, so wasn't expecting to die there, but it's not a huge deal, as long as I don't die too many other times. I've actually reset this Let's Play many times now because of just really awful mistakes, particularly on Stone Man's stage, so we'll sort of see how that happens here. Hopefully I don't die at the same parts again. There are lots of, I don't want to say cheap deaths in this game, but because of the screen crunch, there are sections where enemies just sort of appear out of nowhere and you just slam into them. That is one of my complaints with the game, and it definitely makes the game a little less enjoyable than it could be overall. But honestly, in my opinion, they really couldn't have done it any other way. I mean, they could have done it the Mega Man 1 style, not Mega Man 1, but the Mega Man Game Boy style, where they used the same basically enemy and Mega Man sprite sizes as I did on the NES, but force you know, the arenas to be much smaller. So in Mega Man's on Game Boy, you always see the ceiling, and you always see on boss fights, you always see the far outside wall, which means the arenas are insanely short and small in those games. And which means you have less room to move on the boss fight. So while sometimes I can't see the boss here, at least I can move and really dodge these guys. Anyone that's played, say, Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge on Game Boy will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very frustrating in those games. So I actually personally prefer the screen crunch aspect versus, you know, how it's generally handled with the Game Boy games. Where the Game Boy games use, you know, that full classic Mega Man sprite size, which makes him look really big on the screen, but the arenas are shrunk down significantly, which makes actual legitimate dodging very difficult in those games. And so while, you know, everything looks zoomed in on this version, at least the arenas are of a decent size. So let's go ahead and try to tackle Stone Man next, and hope I don't die at a couple of these parts that I've died at so many times trying to record this freaking Let's Play. You can tell I'm a little frustrated and flustered right now. And I thought to myself, starting this recording, I was like, you know, I should probably start over and not leave that in. But you know what? Screw it. Let's Play recording is not always as easy as some people probably think it is. This is actually one of the hardest Let's Plays I've done recently in terms of re-records. I mean, I've stopped and restarted so many times. I've probably wasted about 2.5 hours trying to record a 30-minute video, which is absolutely horrendous. So, but that aside, you'll notice that some things are missing from Mega Man 5. For those of you guys that are familiar with Mega Man 5, there are no beat letters in this game, so there's actually no way to get beat. Beat is a little bird that can help you out in the classic Mega Man games, Mega Man's 5 and 6 in particular, and then some later Mega Mans as well on subsequent platforms. There are also some other cutbacks as well. For instance, Eddie, aka Flip Top, is nowhere to be found in this version. His arenas are still there, where he would normally appear, but instead of appearing, just normal energy will appear in his place, or a power-up will appear in his place. So yeah, so no Eddie in this game, no Beat, and a lot of other parts of the game have been trimmed back as well. Although, interestingly, you do still have the M-Tank, which will actually refill all of your ammunition. So for those of you guys that actually used boss sub-weapons quite a bit, you do have the M-Tank to refill that. And you do still have secrets, like this. And speaking of M-Tank, this is actually where it is. It's on Stone Man's level, like that. Stone Man has 3 little cubbies like that you can discover by shooting rocks on the right-hand side of the screen. And let's go ahead and charge up our attack here. There are a couple of turret-based enemies here that usually take multiple hits. But with a fully charged attack, you can actually just cut through them in one shot. And that's kind of how I recommend dealing with them. Be it on normal or hard mode, it doesn't really matter. And unfortunately I had to take some damage there, not a huge deal, but let's go ahead and charge up again. And we're gonna go ahead and cut through this guy in one hit. Just like so. Alright, so this part can be a little aggravating, so what we're gonna do is charge up here, and then we're gonna jump and release at the same time. I actually have died to that guy multiple times. And we're going to actually grab this energy tank here as well. And unfortunately, these platforms, they don't spawn back in right away. So let's... I don't know. They haven't... Yeah, let me actually try to... I'm going to try something different here. I'm going to try to scroll the screen over like this. And then move back. Yo, oh, look at that. There they are. Oops, I almost fell to my death right there. So let's just hold down the button. You can actually tell that you're in camera change mode by Mega Man no longer blinking. So Mega Man's eyes are probably bloodshot right now. Ooh, I actually... you know, when I do Game Gear stuff on my analog Mega SG as well, I actually use a Sega 3-button controller. And because there are 3 buttons on the controller, whereas in the Game Gear there are only 2, I get a little dyslexic on my button presses. And as such, sometimes I make the really dumb mistake of pressing the wrong button. And I did it just right there. I'm gonna jump on that platform, but instead I fired and I almost walked off the pit. It's really embarrassing, actually, doing that. But, you know, it is what it is. I just kind of deal with it. One thing I do recommend doing when you play Game Gear stuff on the analog Mega SG, if you have a system, if you have a Mega SG like I do, using a 3-button controller, I find that the 6-button controllers, having the start button right above B and C on the 3-button controller is very handy. Because on the Game Gear, the start button is right above your main buttons as well, so it feels a little more natural playing with the Sega 3-button controller. Whereas the Sega 6-button controller on the Genesis, the start button's on the middle of the controller, so you have to reach over completely, so it feels much less natural if you're used to Game Gear games. So Stone Man here basically just jumps around like so, and a lot of times I like to wait for him to slam to the ground, because you always get a free hit when he comes back up out of the ground like that. Now, for those of you guys that are fans of... you know, Mega Man 5, you'll notice that there weren't any rocks thrown around. Well, the rocks appear when you play on hard mode. Although in this game, his rock patterns they're not the same as they are in Mega Man 5, and it is extremely difficult to avoid them. And it's one of my major complaints with this game, is the boss implementation is not done nearly as well as it was in the classic Mega Mans. Boss patterns that were very manageable in the classic Mega Man games are made almost impossible now. Which is extremely frustrating, unfortunately. So that's one reason I also recommend playing on normal mode, because hard mode just makes things extremely infuriating, just very, very frustrating. Now, the levels themselves on hard mode, I think, are pretty great. They're actually a lot of fun on hard mode, because you have more enemies, you have more stuff to shoot, but the issues with the boss fights make it so it's just not really worth playing. Now, there's a leap of faith right here. You can jump over to the left, or you can jump straight down. don't jump towards the middle because you'll land on those spikes. And I've actually missed those spikes just barely multiple times, making a leap of faith without moving that camera down. So make sure that you're taking advantage of that camera, those camera controls on a first playthrough. And this part of the level is actually where beat letters would be as well, but since there's no beat in this game, there are no beat letters. Now let's go ahead and just slide over like this. Take advantage of that low gravity and just fly right to the ceiling. Now you have to be extra careful with just flying to the ceiling in this game because you can't see the ceiling for you know, most of the playthrough. And on this level you'll just slam right into spikes if you're not careful. So you know, like I said earlier, screen crunch aside, the game is still a lot of fun to play. And I definitely recommend Mega Man fans try it out. Even non-Mega Man fans that are maybe starving for an action platformer that feels unlike most Game Gear and Master System games. I keep saying Master System, even though it's not a Master System game, because the Game Gear is basically a Sega Master System. Its hardware is pretty much identical outside of being able to display more colors on screen at once. That's really the only difference from what I understand. And it's actually kind of a shame that this wasn't brought to the Master System in, say, Europe or something like that. And interestingly enough, this is a Western-only game, or I shouldn't say Western, I should say United States, North American game. North America, not just United States. Yeah, this game wasn't released in Europe, it wasn't released in Japan, which is actually kind of odd to me. I'm actually surprised, especially that it wasn't released in Europe. Unless maybe the Game Gear just wasn't that popular in Europe. I don't know about its popularity. I know Master System was very popular in Europe, but I'm not sure about Game Gear. Anyone out there watching from that region, can you comment on the Game Gear's popularity over there in Europe? Or the UK, any part over there between those regions. So I'm definitely legitimately curious because it's not something I've really ever bothered looking into before. So, but yeah. All right, last boss fight. Now, something to keep in mind when you play this game: don't be mashing the start button after the password screen, because you will accidentally go back into a level you've already beaten. That mechanic is retained from Mega Man's 5 and 6, and you know, the only reason to go back into a level is to, say, farm for some extra lives, or to get the M-Tank that you might have missed, or some other E-Tanks that you might have missed. I don't believe an energy tank... I don't believe energy tanks reappear in levels, so I don't think you can grind out for them, although it's not something I've ever bothered to experiment with. So if anyone has confirmation on that, let me know in the comments section as well. These guys here are very dangerous on hard mode. They'll actually kill you instantly, and the checkpoint is all the way back at the beginning of the level. Now, these guys just constantly respawn, so I recommend stopping here at the end and then killing one and then dashing through immediately, like so, like I just did. So, and just like in Mega Man 5, you can actually come here for a free energy tank. And unlike Mega Man 5, though, you can't really see the E-Tank, which is actually kind of nice. I like that it's actually a secret in this version of the game. That is actually one of the things that Screen Crunch allows. Is it makes things like that a little more obfuscated, a little bit harder to see. So it actually is a secret in this game, whereas in Mega Man 5, it's just, you can see it the second you walk up that ladder, and you're like, okay, there's an energy tank over there. I'm guessing I can walk over there. I suppose. And yeah, sure enough, you just jump up, and it's a very easy power-up to get. No thought required, really. So one thing you'll notice, too, is that the hitboxes, the collision window is very, very small on a lot of these enemies, these bigger enemies, and that's definitely a downside to some of them. I think some of the hit detection could have been a little bit better in this game. Also, later on in the game, some enemies that take up a lot of screen space and have larger hitboxes on them are much smaller in this game and thus much more difficult to hit. And I'll sort of point out one as we get into it later on. So that's actually a leap of faith right there. I already knew those spikes were going to be there. Remember, you can use your camera. You can zoom the camera around like so. So what I recommend doing is just stopping there and then zooming the camera down, and you will actually reveal the spikes. So a very important mechanic to keep in mind of. Unfortunately, the hitboxes on those guys right there is just extremely large, so it's actually very easy to actually slam into them. So again, zoom the camera down so we can reveal these platforms. Otherwise, you just can't see these platforms at all. That was, see, look at that. That hitbox was just massive. I didn't even really touch the guy. There was a discernible gap between me and the enemy, and I still got hit by him. So what we're gonna do here is go straight to Brightman. That's Napalm Man's weakness. And so we're gonna go ahead and just mash that button. And look at these blasts. They're extremely difficult to avoid. And so, and I actually just kind of wasted Brightman's weapon. So, you know, there are still invincibility frames in this game. While the iframes are shorter than they are in other classic Mega Man games, you still can't just mash your fire button and have every shot count. So what I was doing with Brightman's weapon was getting a little desperate, getting a little antsy, and mashing the attack button, wasting ammo, because I wasn't able to make every use of that weapon count, because some of those uses were when Napalm Man was blinking, and so he couldn't be damaged when he was blinking, and so I actually wasted my ammo. I probably should have been able to kill him completely with Brightman's ammunition, but was not able to because I used it recklessly. And that's why I'm such a strong proponent of shooting with intent and not just mashing when mashing's not going to actually do you any good. So, Mega Man 4 fans will notice that we went to Dr. Cossack's castle, but now we're at Wave Man stage. What is up with that? Well, this is where the second half of the game sort of falls flat on its face. For one, there are only 3 more stages. This one, and another one. Like actual legitimate levels, like not just boss fights and that's it. Yeah, so we go to Dr. Cossack's castle, which is one of the main villains in Mega Man 4, and, but we fight, you know, normal Mega Man 5 and Mega Man 4 enemies now, which is odd. So we don't actually go to any Dr. Cossack level, we just go to Mega Man 4 and 5 stages again, and then we go to a Mega Man 2 stage, believe it or not. It's going to be Quick Man's level. And then we are going to go to Dr. Wily himself for the 7th stage. Actually, 8th stage. It's 8 stages. I don't know why I've been saying it to myself 7 stages. It's actually technically 8 stages. I think 7 main stages and then a boss fight. I think that's how you can look at it. So we're going to go ahead and, you know, sort of float up on these bubbles, just like in Mega Man 5. And this was actually a mechanic that was reused in later Mega Man games as well. Like, I believe Mega Man 9 uses the bubble mechanic as well. Which is actually kind of a fun mechanic. I've always liked it, but you have to watch out for traps like these spikes up top. Now notice that I'm doing baby jumps as well. You can do baby jumps exactly like you could in classic NES Mega Mans. And just like in Mega Man 5 and Wave Man stage, we're going to go to the sort of the jet ski kind of boat firing thing. I don't even know what you call it. So no charging up on this section. You just have to shoot normally. And unfortunately, Mega Man can only have 2 buster shots on screen at once, whereas in the classic Mega Mans on NES, you can have 3 on screen at once. So that actually makes this part a little more tricky, because you can have less projectiles on screen at a time. So one strategy I use in this game is I generally try to wait until enemies are right in front of me, or if I'm going to taper shots like this, I do it very slowly, just one at a time. And this is one of those enemies I was talking about. In Mega Man 5, I believe this actually shifts to a black screen, and he's much, much larger. And you have to hit his little blue window there, and that hitbox opening is much, much larger on Mega Man 5 on NES. So this guy is a little more annoying to fight on this one, not as fun to fight. For one, he doesn't look as good because he's not as large. And the opening to his weakness is much smaller, which isn't as fun. It's harder to just, you know, mash the button and just pummel him with attacks, which is kind of a bummer. So this second half here, it's actually very easy to take a lot of damage. You'll get combined with dolphins and these other vehicle guys, kind of stacked on top of them. And with only being able to fire 2 bullets at once, as opposed to 3, it's very easy to get ganged up on that part. Okay, so we've got a turret here, like so, and we're going to charge up. And, you know, for those of you guys that have been paying attention, a lot of the bosses in this game kind of jump around like they're on speed or something. Wave Man here is pretty much the only boss in the game that actually acts more like he does in Mega Man 4 or 5. He was actually from Mega Man 5 specifically. And notice how he actually goes across the screen at a relatively moderate pace. It's actually very close to his pattern and speed in Mega Man 5, which is actually quite nice. I don't know why they sped up all the other bosses. I don't know if it was just an oversight or an accident or if it was deliberate. I would actually really like to know. Because Wave Man is actually a lot of fun to fight because he's paced like he is a normal Mega Man boss. But the other bosses are just sped up like crazy. Stone Man I'm fine with because, yes, he's fast, but your slide is quick enough to get underneath him, and he always slams into the ground, revealing, you know, an opening, basically, that you can take advantage of, and it's a pattern you can replicate over and over again. Whereas a lot of these other bosses, they just bounce around off the walls like crazy, and there's no real discernible pattern. From what I can tell with a lot of these guys. And that makes them not as fun to fight. Which is a shame, because the levels themselves, I think, are fantastic. I mean, most of these stages, you know, it was good level design in the NES versions of these games. And it's still good level design, even with screen crunch in this version of the game. But the bosses, I think, are definitely the weak points of this game. Not all bosses. Like I said, I do actually quite enjoy Wave Man. I don't mind Stone Man, but a lot of the other bosses are just very questionable with their, you know, their patterns and, you know, and whatnot. Their attack choices. It's just kind of odd. So they did such a great job replicating many of the features of Mega Man's 4 and 5, but then just sort of bombed out on the boss fights themselves. It's just kind of weird. So. But we're already a good ways through Toadman stage here, and we've got these mini-bosses, although they're not much of mini-bosses on the normal difficulty. You'll notice that they die just instantly. They die in one hit. On hard mode, you do actually have to fight them the normal way. So there we go, just took one shot and then killed them. So for those of you guys looking for an extra challenge on those mini-boss sections, it's, you know, definitely play hard mode. But just keep in mind that hard mode, it's irritating. It's very irritating in some cases. So mainly on the boss fights and whatnot. Now, one thing you'll probably notice if you played a lot of classic Mega Man is when you pick up health pickups and whatnot, Mega Man doesn't actually stop to apply that health. It doesn't stop. He doesn't tick up. It just applies it immediately, which is kind of interesting. I actually don't mind that change. I'm going to go ahead and use an energy tank as well. Also, a mechanic I wanted to talk about that you have to keep in mind of is do not press buttons 1 or 2 on the Buster. If you do, it'll use an energy tank. It'll even use an energy tank if your life is already full. So you have to watch out for that. So if you want to go back to Mega Man, don't hit buttons 1 or 2, hit start. Like so. And actually, let's go ahead and try to charge up. And Toadman here does a ton of damage. And this is normal difficulty, too. He just does a ton of damage. We're just going to shoot him like this. Take advantage of those smaller invincibility frames. Although, what's interesting is Toadman and Waveman, they have longer invincibility frame timings than the other 4 bosses in the game. So you actually can't hurt them as quickly, as rapidly as you can with the other bosses when you're just using your standard Buster Shot, your non-charged Buster Shot. Alright, so now we're going to go to the one and only Mega Man 2 stage in the game, which is Quickman's level. And unfortunately, Quickman himself is nowhere to be found in the game. We get a decent replication of the level itself, with some nice upgraded graphical touches, but we don't get Quickman himself. There are some other changes in this level as well. First off, what we're going to do, though, is go ahead and bust out Rush Coil. Just like so, and go ahead and bring him out and grab this extra life here. And let's go ahead and, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually demonstrate a couple of the weapons here, because I don't usually do that. So here's Starman's weapon, which is completely useless, apparently. Here's Napalm Man's weapon, which is also somewhat useless. And these weapons are so useless. Here's Waveman's weapon, which is apparently somewhat useless. Let's go ahead and scroll this down a little bit. These weapons are not powerful at all. Here's Toadman's weapon, which is probably a little less useless than others. And then we've got Stone Man's weapon. We've already used Bright Man's weapon, which basically does a screen-wide blast. So these are the infamous beams from Mega Man 2. Now, what I've noticed is that these beams actually won't kill you instantly as long as you touch the edge, the bright, sparkly edge of them. If you touch the solid part, you will actually die in one hit, which is interesting. Now, actually, I think you can touch the solid part as they're forming. It's not until they're fully solid and stopped in place that you die in one hit. I think? I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll have to try to verify that. But yeah, this part is kind of not designed very well, if you ask me. I mean, you pretty much are guaranteed to take damage here no matter what, which is frustrating. So for those of you guys familiar with Mega Man 2 on NES, you guys know that, you know, you can get past this 100% of the time as long as you play well and you know the pattern. You can't do that in this. It seems like you're forced to take damage, guaranteed, no matter what. And we've got Dr. Wily's name there, and unfortunately there is no Quick Man, like I said. And we're warped straight to the final boss of the game. And this is why I said earlier that the back half of the game, it kind of falls flat on its face. It's still a very fun game. I still recommend playing it, and I've still enjoyed my time with this game quite a bit. But it just ends abruptly, and the progression of the last few stages is questionable as well. Like, you go to Dr. Cossack's castle, but you fight normal Robot Masters. Why couldn't you just include a couple more Robot Masters like the Game Boy games did, and just have them on the main character select screen? So it's just kind of a questionable design. Maybe the developers were rushed, maybe US Gold didn't want to pay for a larger ROM or something like that. Who knows? Could have been a variety of factors. So the second half of the game just feels fairly rushed, which is quite unfortunate. But the game is still a lot of fun. Like I said, I highly recommend playing this game if you're a classic Mega Man fan. So as you can see, I'm basically just shooting Dr. Wily with my Charge Buster shot. If he appears right on top of you, you're pretty much guaranteed to take a hit. He shoots these projectiles down to the ground. They spread out like so, and then all these other ones rotate around him. It's actually somewhat similar to some of Dr. Wily's final forms in the later NES Mega Man games. But that's it! We just beat the game. That is the entire game from start to finish. Mega Man for the Sega Game Gear. Actual gameplay-wise was probably about 30 minutes flat, you know, considering a couple-minute intro to talk about stuff. So, this is mission perfect, and we'll get some fireworks and whatnot. We actually get a late-game Dr. Cossack theme from Mega Man 4, actually one of my favorite tunes in Mega Man 4. It's actually kind of a shame that we didn't get more Robot Masters and there wasn't a legitimate Dr. Wily or Dr. Cossack castle stage. It's kind of a bummer, because, I mean, for one, they're actually good levels, generally speaking, for the most part, especially in Mega Man 4. I really enjoy those stages in Mega Man 4. And, yeah, having some more Robot Masters would have been cool. And toning down the speed of the Robot Masters in this game would have also been very welcome. But still, overall, I really enjoy this game. I'm glad to have finally done a Let's Play of it. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this playthrough. Hopefully it was something new for a lot of you guys, because I know Game Gear Mega Man's not a very common game. It's really shot up in price on the collector's market. I don't think it sold very well back in the day. It was a game I always wanted on Game Gear back then, but never got it. And I never really bothered tracking down a copy. And now that they're so expensive, I will probably never own a real copy of this game. As I assume most people probably won't. But it's still a good game. It's very colorful. It plays better than most Game Gear and Master System action platformers, like I said at the top of the video. It's just very snappy. They did a fantastic job replicating the Mega Man look and feel. And screen crunch aside, which you can sort of mitigate a little bit with the camera control functionality, isn't that bad to deal with when you're familiar with the game. It kind of hurts on the first playthrough, but as long as you know to use the camera, which I didn't, the first playthrough can still go pretty smooth, if you ask me. So, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this playthrough. I don't really have a whole lot else to talk about. I know there are probably some other mechanics that I missed out on, some weird checkpoint changes and whatnot that are kind of interesting and of note. But yeah, I'm not going to bother going into those here since we're already done with the game. So, yeah, if you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, or if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. I don't know why you'd still be here if you hated it, but I digress. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. I've got hundreds of Let's Plays on here, and many more to come. Thanks to everyone, you know... Thanks to everyone that's still subscribed. Holy crap, I'm totally bombing out here. This is like my 15th attempt at this damn thing. So, alright, you know, screw it. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later. Until the next one, take it easy.